Today's lesson is Beyond Honey, Surprising Facts About Bees. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to be talking about bees. Not letters B, but we're going to talk about the insects, bees, that fly around and pollinate plants and make honey and sometimes sting us. And they're not something to be afraid of. We actually have some interesting facts concerning bees that we'd like to talk about with you today.
Yes, we're going to be talking about some surprising facts. So we're going beyond honey because I think most people, when they think about bees, they think about honey because honey is a product that comes from bees. But we're going to go beyond this fact and learn some other details about these animals, these insects, that are quite surprising.
Yep, so beyond honey, they are more than just an insect that produces honey. There are lots of other things to learn about bees, which we're going to do in today's program. So let's get to it. Let's introduce our topic by listening to the first paragraph right now.
Beyond honey, surprising facts about bees. Bees are a familiar sight out in nature, but did you know that many species are at risk of becoming extinct?Keep reading to learn more about this and other surprising bee facts.
大家好，第一部分我们来介绍名词 species， 也可以发音为 species。它的意思是动植物的种或是物种。例如 Scientists discovered several new species of frogs in this region. 科学家在这个地区发现了好几种新的蛙类物种。又或者说This species of bird is small, but it can fly very fast. 这个品种的鸟很小，但是能飞得很快。再来我们看到形容词 extinct， 它的意思是灭绝的、绝种的或是不复存在的。例如 Dinosaurs have been extinct for millions of years. 恐龙已经绝种好几百万年了。又或者说 A fossilized bone from an extinct whale was found on the beach.那座海滩上发现了一种绝种鲸鱼的化石骨骸。另外补充这个字的名词 extinction E-X-T-I-N-C-T-I-O-N extinction 意思是灭绝或是绝种。例如 Human activities have driven many wild animals to extinction 人类活动导致许多野生动物灭绝。又或者说Many of the plants and animals on Earth may face extinction due to global warming. 由于全球暖化，地球上的许多植物和动物可能面临绝种。
Bees are a familiar sight out in nature. But did you know that many species are at risk of becoming extinct? So in this sentence, first of all, we learned that there are many species of bees. So a species is a group of animals or plants, in this case, a group of bees whose members have the same main characteristics and in fact, they are able to breed with one another. So for example, dogs are a species and so are cats.That belong to another species, and dogs and cats can't breed with one another. But two dogs can breed with each other even if they are different types of dogs because they are from the same species.
Right, and of course there are many different kinds of bees, and we call them different species, and a lot of them are at risk of becoming extinct. So if you're at risk of something, that means you are in danger of something. Something bad might happen to you.So, for example, if you ride your U-bike around the city while you're looking at your phone, you're not only putting yourself at risk, but you're putting the lives of others at risk. And in this particular case, yes, lots of bees are at risk of becoming extinct. And if something goes extinct, or if it is extinct, that means this species no longer exists. We often bring up the example of dinosaurs. They have gone extinct. But there are other animals that have gone extinct in recent years, like the dodo bird and the Carolina parakeet. Those have all gone extinct.
Yes, and while many species of bees have not gone extinct yet, they are at risk of becoming extinct, which means that they are in danger of becoming extinct, in which case, perhaps one day they will no longer exist.
Right. So, of course, they are at risk of becoming extinct, so we need to know about that. And keep reading to learn more about this and other surprising bee facts. Of course, if you're reading the article, you will continue to read, but if you're listening to our program, well, you'd like to continue listening, and we'll learn some more about bees in the subsequent paragraphs. So let's move on now to the next paragraph. We will listen to it first.
When we think of bees, we often think of hives. It may surprise you to learn then that out of 16,000 bee species, only around 5% live in hives, with most bees being solitary creatures that keep to themselves. That said, there'd be no honey without hives. More specifically, there are only 8 known species of true honeybees, all of which live in hives.
第二部分我们看到名词 hive， 这个字的意思是蜂巢、蜂窝或是蜂群。例如 Don't go near the hive or else you might get stung. 不要靠近蜂巢，不然你可能会被叮。或是 The bees flew out of the hive to find food for their queen. 蜜蜂飞出蜂巢为蜂后觅食。再来我们看到单字 solitary， 它是形容词，指的是动物非群居的，或是独自的、单独的，也可以是唯一的意思。例如 Vanessa enjoyed her solitary life on the small island. Vanessa 享受在小岛上离群所居的生活。
When we think of bees, we often think of hives. Now, before we mentioned that when people think of bees, they often think of honey. But another thing that people often think about when bees come to mind are hives. So a hive is a type of structure in which bees are kept. And they're designed in a way so that honey is in there as well. And beekeepers, people who keep bees, can collect the honey when the honey is produced.
Right, so a hive, of course, is where bees live. It's kind of big and round. Other kinds of insects make hives as well, like I believe hornets can have hives. I guess they're called hornets' nests, but they're similar. In this particular case, though, we've got hives, and that's where bees live. That's what we often think about when we talk about bees. Of course, lots of people will think about getting stung by bees. That's what I think about when I think of bees, because I've been stung before, and it smarts. It hurts. And it may surprise you to learn, then, that out of 16,000 bee species, only around 5% live in hives, with most bees being solitary creatures that keep to themselves. So, yes, indeed, we do think of hives, but it may be surprising for you to learn that not very many of them actually live in hives. We've got 16,000 bee species, and only around 5% of those 16,000 species live in hives. And then the sentence goes on to say, with most bees being solitary creatures. So you can continue the sentence with the word with here if you want to add a point to it. We want to give you some more details here. So yes, most bees are solitary, which means they're all by themselves. They don't work in colonies or they don't live in hives.
It was actually surprising for me to learn that there are actually 16,000 bee species. I didn't realize there were so many species.
Yeah, that's a big number, yeah.
Yeah, and that most of them are solitary creatures. So when you're a solitary creature or a solitary person, it means that you like to spend a lot of time alone, or that is just your nature. Your nature is to spend time alone rather than in company with friends or family members. So a bear, for instance, is considered a solitary creature. So are cats. They're often considered to be solitary, even though that's not necessarily the case. And solitary people and animals tend to keep to themselves. When you keep to yourself, it simply means you remain alone. You're not with other people.
Right. And of course, if you're in prison and you've been a bad boy, you will be put in solitary confinement. and you'll have no choice but to keep to yourself. To keep to oneself just means to live in your own world, basically, and not really relate to other people. You're solitary, you're solo, and you're a lone wolf, I guess we could say. And that said, we've already said that, but there's something else we'd like to add to it. That said, there'd be no honey without hives. So even though it is true that most bee species are solitary, we would not have honey without those hives. So again, we've got 5% of bees living in hives. And then from that 5%, we've only got 8 known species of true honeybees, all of which live in hives. So again, we've got lots of bees living in hives, but not all of them produce honey. We've only got 8 known species, and they are true honeybees. A honeybee, of course, is a bee that produces honey, and all of these 8 species do live in hives.
That's right. So there is no honey without hives. And just one note on that phrase, that said. So we say that said when we want to say that something is true in spite of what we have just said before. Another way of saying that said would be having said that.
So we do have the phrase more specifically. We've already given you some specific information, but we're even going to give you more specific information. So even more specifically, only 8 known species of true honeybees produce honey, but they all live in hives. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's find out some more about bees.
The bees that live in hives have a fascinating social structure. Each hive has a queen, workers, and drones. The drones are the only males and typically make up 10% of the hive. Their only job is to mate with the queen, and in fact, they die after mating. In contrast, workers have many jobs, such as finding food and defending the hive against threats. They're all female and constitute around 90% of the population. Finally, there's the queen. Like the drones, she has just one job, laying eggs, and produces thousands of offspring in her lifetime.
第3部分我们看到名词 contrast 指的是对比、对照或是差异。例如 The contrast between the color of the wall and the color of the curtain is very pretty. 墙壁和窗帘颜色的对比非常漂亮。又或者说 There is a sharp contrast between the director's early movies and his more recent work. 这位导演早期的电影和最近的作品有明显的对比。下一个我们看到 defend它是动词，指的是防卫、保护，也可以是为点点点辩护的意思。例如 The army was sent to defend the border. 这支军队被派去防卫边境。再举一个例子 The lawyer defended his client in court. 那位律师替客户出庭辩护。最后补充这个字的名词 defense, D-E-F-E-N-S-E, defense. 意思是防御或是防卫。例如 This animal has several defenses to protect itself. 这种动物有好几种自我保护的防御手段。又或者说 A long warm coat is a good defense against the cold. 一件又长又温暖的大衣能很好的防御寒冷。
The bees that live in hives have a fascinating social structure. Each hive has a queen, workers, and drones. So here we are talking specifically of those bees that live in hives, not necessarily those that produce honey, just the ones that live in hives. And those that live in hives live with a particular social structure. So imagine hundreds, thousands of bees living in a hive. There must be some kind of order. They can't just be going about each doing its own business. There has to be some kind of order and structure. And that order and structure or social structure is that the bees are divided into different types. Now, there is a queen bee, there are worker bees, and there are drone bees. Specifically, drones or drone bees are male bees that don't do any work. All they do is reproduce with the queen.
Exactly. So again, we've got three different kinds of bees living in the hive. We've got the queen bee, which is the leader of the hive. Everybody works for her. And we've got the workers who do the work, and we've got the drones. I did want to mention that drone here does refer to this specific type of bee, but we also use the word drone when we talk about the sound that they make. It's kind of like a drone sound, bzzz, sort of like that. And also drones are devices that can fly in the sky to take photographs, or in the case of war, they can send explosives to the enemy and try to kill them. But here, of course, we're talking about different kinds of bees in a hive. And as Helen said, the drones are the only males of the hive, and they typically make up 10% of the hive, and their job is to mate with the queen. And in fact, after they mate with the queen, they die. That is often the case. So here we've got the phrase to make up. You could also say constitute. That means that is the figure, or that is the percentage, or that is the amount of these bees living in the hive.
That's right. So when something makes up something else, that thing combines with others to form that other thing. So you could say that this class is made up of many students. In contrast, workers have many jobs, such as finding food and defending the hive against threats. So here we have the phrase in contrast. Now, the word contrast itself is used when you want to show how one thing is different from another. In this case, we were just talking about drones, the male bees that only mate and then die after they mate with the queen. Now, in contrast, in other words, different from drones, workers have many jobs. Drones didn't have many jobs, but workers have many jobs, such as finding food and defending the hive against threats.
Yep, so in this sentence, we've got the phrase in contrast, and contrast just refers to things at different extremes. And we could also say they mean the opposite of things. I could say, for example, that my negative is kind of thin, so I need to use high contrast paper to get an acceptable print. That's a photographic term, but in this particular case, we're talking about opposites. We've got the drones that only mate with the queen, but on the other side of the scale, we've got the workers, which have many jobs. And the example we're giving here, the examples of their jobs include finding food and defending the hive against threats. So the hive might be attacked maybe by other bees or other kinds of insects, or maybe by a crow or something. So they have to fight off those enemies. They have to defend the hive against those threats. So here, to defend just means to try to protect yourself. And we often use this with the preposition against, to defend yourself against the enemy.
Right. For instance, during the Middle Ages, people built these high, thick walls to defend the city against enemy attacks. Now, here, talking about bees and worker bees, they're all female and they constitute around 90% of the population. So before we said that drones make up around 10% of the hive. Here we're saying that workers, which are all female, constitute around 90% of the population of the bees that live in the hive. So constitute is another word for make up. When one thing constitutes another, it is one of the many things that together form a bigger thing. So here, female worker bees come together, and as a group, they make up 90% of the bigger thing, which is the population. So I could also say that female students constitute about 60% of the students at this university, as an example.
Right. So again, we're talking about the workers. They're all female, and they make up or constitute around 90% of the population of all the bees in the hive. And finally, there's the queen. And like the drones, she has just one job, laying eggs, and produces thousands of offspring in her lifetime. So yes, indeed, the drones just have one job, to mate with the queen. And the queen's only job is to be mated by those drones. And of course, if you mate with a drone, if you get together with a boy, then you're going to produce offspring. and you're going to lay eggs. And here, of course, the queen will produce thousands of offspring in her lifetime. Here we have the word offspring. That just refers to your children, the boys and the girls you give birth to. We don't really use this in everyday conversation. Oh, Mr. Jones, how many offspring do you have? You'd probably say, how many children do you have? This is more of a scientific term.
Right. But you could use it to talk about the children of human beings. So as Roger mentioned, you wouldn't say, how are your offspring doing? But you might say, when talking about a historical figure, that this figure's offspring went on to do very notable things. So it would be used in the abstract or in some kind of more academic or professional context.
Okay, so there you have a description of the different kinds of bees that constitute a beehive. And we've got some other facts to tell you about in our next program. But right now, we're going to turn things over to Hanny, our beloved Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分有一句写到 That said, there'd be no honey without hives. 话说回来，没有蜂巢就不会有蜂蜜。那这边用到 that said 是指话说回来，尽管如此，这常常会摆在句首，用来作为语义的转折。那么 that 指的就是前面提到的事情咯。举例来说 Planning a trip can be stressful. That said, I enjoy the process. 规划旅行可能让人倍感压力。话虽如此，我很享受那个过程。好，那我们接着看到课文下一句，他说 More specifically, there are only 8 known species of true honeybees, all of which live in hives. 更具体的说，已知的真正蜜蜂物种只有8种，它们都生活在蜂巢中。好，这个句子里面它用到all of which 那像这样的用法呢，是用带有修饰语的关系代名词来引导关系子句对先行词做补充说明。我们就来学习相关的用法。好，我们这边先用关系代名词 which 说明。这个 which 当关系代名词可以用来代指前方的事物，也就是先行词。那 which 的前面还可以加上量词、数字、百分比或是最高级等等，然后加上of， 就是可以去表达所占的比例。像 two of which 就可以表达先行词其中2个怎么样怎么样。 some of which 先行词其中一些怎么样。 the best of which 先行词其中最好的怎么样。 1/3 of which 就是先行词其中1/3怎么样怎么样等等。好，那我们就来看一个例句是 He showed us a jar filled with marbles, some of which are extremely rare. 他向我们展示一个装满弹珠的罐子，其中有一些非常罕见。那特别注意，我们这个用法是在对先行词做补充说明，这是属于非限定用法，所以记得要用逗号把这个补充说明的部分跟主要子句隔开来。好，那接着如果你的关系代名词指称的先行词是人，那么 which 就要改成 whom， 也就是说我们会用量词、数字、百分比、最高级等等加上 of whom 来引导关系子句。例如 They have 3 daughters, the youngest of whom will be entering college next year. 他们有3个女儿，其中年纪最小的明年要上大学了。好，那另外这个用法其实也适用于所有个关系代名词 whose， 那记得 whose 后面是要接名词哦。举例来说 The preschool has 60 children, 1/3 of whose parents don't speak English. 那所幼儿园有60个学生，其中1/3孩子的父母不会说英文。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Species. Jungles are home to a wide variety of plant and animal species. Extinct. With only a small number surviving in the wild, African forest elephants are in danger of going extinct. Hive. Mr. Morris was alarmed when he found a large hive in his barn. Contrast. In contrast to yesterday's heat, today's weather was cool and comfortable. Defend. The knight swore to defend the village from the angry dragon. Constitute. Individuals from various departments constituted the team.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoy reading along with us. I am Helen.
I am Roger.
See you next time.